Welcome to Unleashed at Work and Home. I'm Colleen Pilar, and this is where pet professionals come for honest conversations about what it really takes to show up for yourself while serving the animals you love. If you've ever felt caught between compassion and exhaustion, you're in the right place. Here we explore what it means to reconnect with your inner wisdom and rediscover the joy that brought you to this work. Make sure to join my email community at colleenpilar.com for gentle, practical insights designed specifically for pet professionals. Now, let's dive in. Welcome back to Unleashed at Work and Home. My guest today is Morgan Jenkins, and she's the co-owner of, We Leash the Hounds? Am I saying it right?
Yes, We Leash the Hounds.
Yeah, okay. All of a sudden, as it was coming out, I fell over it. So welcome, Morgan. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
So let's go back to the business name because it is quite clever. How did you choose that?
So honestly, my husband and I were thinking about starting a business. I'd already been in the pet care industry for quite a few years. And so we were trying to think of cutesy names, but things that maybe weren't already taken or ground that had been really retrod. And it's actually a Simpsons reference to there's a line that says we leash the or release the hounds. And so we're very punny people. So we thought, how about we leash the hounds, which kind of sounds like release the hounds. And then it just kind of stuck. It felt like the right name for us. We do sometimes get asked if we exclusively work with hounds. And I have to let people know that we're equal opportunists. But for the most part, people really like the name. They think it's cute.
Yeah. And hound, at least, is a word that many people consider to be sort of a generic dog word, as opposed to, like, if poodle was your rhyming thing. You know, people don't say, like, gotta go home and let out the poodle unless they mean a poodle. But people do say, oh, yeah, gotta go see my hound, even if it's not a hound. That does happen from time to time.
Yeah. And it also, it works out because after we had been in business for many years, we learned that my husband has a very, very severe cat allergy. So it also helps to delineate us from other businesses that serve, cat and dog households. We unfortunately are dogs only. So it does give us that little bit of distinction as well.
So tell me a little bit about the services that you provide, your business, not just you, but.
So we started out as a dog walking company. So that's what we had been doing. We started in 2015. And then in 2020, we adopted our second dog at the time. And I realized that I needed to expand my skill set a little bit in order to be the guardian of this particular dog. And that really led me down the path of realizing that I wanted to become a trainer. So now I also offer training and specifically family pause services. That's kind of what we've expanded to. So as a small business owner, you're kind of always thinking, what can I add? How can I diversify my offerings? So that's what we do. We used to do pet sitting as well, but we actually scaled that back because you start to realize that you're spreading yourself a little too thin. And we like to joke that the cobbler's children wear no shoes. We were like, we don't even have time to walk our own dang dogs. So we took pet sitting off the menu officially. And I think that was the right choice for us.
Yeah. Well, the cobbler's shoes analogy is really common in this world. I can't tell you how many clients I talk to who say, gosh, I spend all day taking care of other people's animals, and then I come home and my own loved ones get what's left of me, and that's hard. It's emotionally really hard for everyone. Especially for, a dog standing there wagging and excited. Let's go do something fun. And you're like, oh, let's not. Does cuddle on the couch sound fun? Because that's what I have in mind.
Yeah. You get home and you realize their cup is still needing to be
Yeah.
filled. And, some days I'm like, buddy, I don't have it in me. But most of the time we find a way to rally and make sure that at least we're getting, even if it's dark, even if it's cold, sometimes even if the weather is truly horrendous, I'm like, what's one more? Just don't even take your shoes off. Don't even sit down. Just leash them up, turn around, out we go. Because it's, when you spend all day thinking about the well-being of animals, it's very hard to come home and deprioritize your dog. I'm
Yeah.
like, "Ugh, I got one more in me. Let's go."
Yeah. Yeah. The cost is high of it because we do know the value of taking care of animals in the way we believe they deserve to be taken care of. That
Yeah.
in the times where we fall short, it's heavier and harder, uh, than it is for others. And also, we do need some compassion for that sometimes we are gonna fall short because 'cause we're human and okay, like, okay. But the idea of I can do one more can be a helpful frame of like, "Okay, I've got one more in the tank, and I'm saving it for you, and here we go. I'm coming home. No, don't take the shoes off. Don't sit down. Do not sit down."
Yeah. Don't stop moving because it's harder. But yeah, there's definitely days where I have to just put my foot down and say, what I need for me is to not do this. And
Mhm.
honestly, it's usually on Thursdays. I'm like, I hit that wall and I don't get the Friday energy spike. So sometimes we just have to skip a walk on Thursdays and life goes on. But um, yeah, it is hard when you know the benefit that it has for them. And I'm like, there's nothing, it's very hard to replicate the enrichment that they get from a walk in the house versus, there's other types of things that we can do for them. But I'm like, you checking the P mail, I just can't do that for you in the house.
I am happy that there are so many more relatively simple home-based enrichment ideas than there were when I was training. Like, we kind of defaulted to, well, you can give them a Kong, for many of the years that I was training, and more was coming. I mean, obviously, I kept training for a long time, but just in the years since I stopped training, the things that I've learned as a student make me go, "Oh, that's incredible." But this particular product or this idea wasn't really out there 10 years ago, or 30, as, depending on where in the continuum we're talking about. Um, so one question I always love to ask my guests is, when you were 10, what did you think you were going to do as an adult? What do you think your job was gonna be?
um, I would say a tie between a marine biologist and or like a horse trainer. Those were probably my two things that I wanted to do. I am definitely a former horse girl. I grew up horseback riding. It was my favorite thing in the world. And then also I loved the ocean, and my brother, who is 8 years older than me, was initially on track to go to school for marine biology. So I, grew up watching Shark Week. I know all the weird shark facts. So I knew the animals were probably the direction I was headed. Um, what my eventual path became did not become clear to me until I was almost 20.
So take me through that. So
So I initially I didn't complete college, but I went for 1 year to Colorado State University because they have an excellent equine science program. That's actually, I believe Temple Grandin was on the faculty there. And I realized something. I realized a couple things about myself. One is that I love learning. I don't really thrive in a traditional academic setting, which I think is probably true for a lot of people with ADHD. And I also realized that I love horses. I'm not sure I love horse people. Um, and people are a huge part of any job. And I just realized I didn't know that that was the place for me. So I left school, I went home, and I got a job at a doggy daycare. And I realized there was something about the accessibility of dogs. There's a dog in most homes, and I just realized so much of what I loved about horses I could still get with dogs. And they were more accessible to me, more accessible to other people. Horseback riding is a really expensive hobby.
mhm.
It's not something that everyone could afford to do independently. I could not afford to do it. And I just kind of fell down the dog rabbit hole. Even though I'd grown up with dogs, wanted to learn everything there was to know about them. And that just kind of set me off on my path. So I managed a doggy daycare and boarding facility. And then I started working as a dog walker for someone else. And then I eventually, after meeting my husband, we were not yet married at the time, but we were very much on track to be married. We decided to start our business because I realized I'm also kind of type A about how a business is run. And so I was ready to strike out on my own and apply everything that I'd learned.
So when did you start your business?
2015. We were incorporated in October of 2015.
Incorporated in 20. Okay. So you've
So,
been playing in this field for quite a while.
yeah, I entered the field in 2010. So I've been doing all things dog for like 15 years now. And it's amazing how much you learn over the years and how much you unlearn. Because when I adopted we're now down to one dog, but when we adopted Seamus as our second dog, and I realized I have some knowledge gaps that I need to fill, I also realized how much that I had to unlearn. So it's been a humbling experience to think I know everything there is to know, and then to realize, okay, I have to just let go of some of that, which I think ultimately is good. I think everyone should be open to changing ideas or revising their positions on things when new information becomes available.
Mm-hmm.
So it's been a journey for sure, but I think ultimately a good one.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do think. Well, I mean, I just even said like there's so much that's come out since I was training that I wish I'd had access to some of that then, and it simply wasn't available. But if I was like, well, I know everything I need to know because I trained dogs for however many years, then what a life limiting view that would be. That's perspective. But I did go through a period at the very, very beginning of my career where I sincerely believed that if I really studied hard for like 4 years, so I treat it like college, that I would know what I needed to know, and that would be enough. Like I would know dogs. Um, and it was amazing to me that each time I learned something, it didn't close the door, but it opened 10 more. So I know less about dogs now in my head than I did when I started. But obviously, I've learned so much, and I have so much more I'm just dying to know. So in terms of, is my cup full? Not even close. Not even a little bit.
There's that phenomenon. I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically when someone knows just enough to be
Mhm.
dangerous, or they know just enough to think they know everything. And I think that was definitely something that I was guilty of. I think we all are, especially when we're young.
Mhm.
When I first started, I was basically learning at the heels of people who didn't actually have any formalized education in what they were doing, which I don't take to mean they've gone through higher education. I think that that's sort of like a classist idea. But I think that we can definitely seek out knowledge from trustworthy, accredited sources, and these people had not. So I thought that I knew everything. And then once I really started learning from people who know what they're talking about, I realized I didn't know jack, which is okay. I had to, like I said, revise my position, let go of some things that were either inaccurate or in some cases truly dangerous. And I'm glad I had the opportunity. I would much rather feel as though I have so much left to learn, but know that the knowledge I'm working with is truly sound, than be confidently confidently working with bad information.
Yeah.
I would always rather the former than the latter.
Yeah. I love the way you said that because the experience of uncertainty can be so deeply uncomfortable for people that there is a temptation for many people to just stick with what they know, even if they're pretty sure it isn't exactly right. Like there's a little bit of like, oh dear, but I know it. And the comfort of that certainty becomes a really tricky piece. It requires a maturity and a curiosity, but a real maturity to say, "No, I'm just gonna keep learning. I'll just keep learning." Um, and and appreciating that you know what you know and that you have value at all of the levels, but the stance of "I'm going to keep learning" is what keeps it healthy and appropriate for your clients and for the animals you work with. It's like, would you do things, differently now with the knowledge you have than you did 10 years ago? Sure, yes. Um, doesn't make you a terrible person for doing what you knew best at that time. And, um, we're always trying to do the best we know at any given time. So we need to be responsible for learning what we should be knowing.
That's something that I tell my families that I work with a lot because especially, in the context of dogs and children, or if I'm working with, say, right now, I've got one client and they are reflecting a lot on their past dog now that they have a puppy. And there's a lot of guilt or, like, self-judgment about things they did back then or wish they hadn't. And something that I say is, we do the best we can with the information we have at the time. So I'm not interested in judging you for your old dog or not knowing XYZ about the dynamic between your dog and your baby because how how could you have known? That's why I'm here. And I think we have to think about ourselves in the same way, is we're all doing the best we can with the information we have at the time, or as Jen loves to say, you know what you know until you grow. And that's
Mhm,
really true. I don't think in some cases here's what I'll say. I think in general, the best way to think of it is that no one is doing anything with malicious intent.
mhm,
It doesn't mean it doesn't cause harm sometimes when we are maybe doing something that we don't know enough to really be taking on, or we're parroting bad information or whatever it may be, or advocating for something that's not safe. But for the most part, people really do have good intentions when they enter into something. And that was always true of me. Even though I didn't really know what I was talking about 15 years ago, I had the best of intentions and I was advocating for dogs and for people in the way that I knew how.
I ask all of my guests to share some words that have meaning, and this feels like a great transition into the words you shared. You shared an Italian phrase, "Tutto passa." Did I say it right?
Yes, tutto passa. Um,
Passa.
and it means everything passes. And the thing that I like about this phrase is it's not, some people liken it to the phrase, this too shall pass, but tutto passa is not explicitly negative. It doesn't just mean the bad things will pass. It really just talks about how everything passes. So I think of life in seasons, and sometimes we are going through a season of life that is challenging, or we're having a day that's really challenging, but other times things are really good. And I like that that phrase encourages me to really, like, marinate in the goodness while it's
Mhm,
happening too. Because the only thing consistent about life is change, is that time
yeah.
will pass. And so it can be a comfort, but it's also a reminder to be present in those moments where things are going well, because you want to remember that too. Like, save those glimmers for a rainy day is kind of how I feel. And especially when you're a small business owner, you sometimes need that reminder when business is slow or when you are feeling uncertain about what comes next for you. Or sometimes when I have a really heavy workload and I feel overwhelmed or imposter syndrome rears its head. It's like it won't always be like this. That's that's kind of what it comes back to. My husband and I, when we're dealing with our own mental health stuff, we will say to each other, it's not for forever, it's just for right now. And sometimes you need to remind yourself as a small business owner, like, if I'm having a week or two or a few months even where business is slow, it will cycle back around. Before you know it, your client list will be full again. don't get so preoccupied in this current moment in time. Just trust that it will cycle back around. It will pass.
Yeah. So these words, when did you first encounter them?
I actually encountered them a couple years ago. Um, I love jewelry, and I saw it was an antique ring, and someone had engraved this phrase into it. It was like an antique signet ring, and I was like, I love that so much. And then a short while later, I saw a picture of a man, an old Italian man who had just come out of the sea, and he had the words tattooed on his chest. And I was like, it's very strange. I don't know if you're familiar with the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon, which is where you see something once and then it keeps cropping up for you. But when that happened, I thought, you know, I think I like this. I think it's meant for me. And in high school, I studied Italian for 4 years. I went to Italy with my Italian teacher. I still practice Italian on my Duolingo every day. So it kind of felt like something that I was meant to take notice of. And I actually have it on a little pendant that I'm wearing today. So it's just a helpful reminder for me to, as an anxious person, it's like, just be in the moment. It's going to be okay. It'll pass. Whatever it is, good or bad, you know, it's going to be okay.
Yeah. And because life really is the experience, and the experience, good or bad, passes. And so we can't get them back. So to actually know that if we're always kind of projecting into the future of like, well, then I will be happy, do this, relax, whatever the thing is,
hmm
um, we miss so much of real life because everything passes, and what was good about today passes, and what was hard about today passes. All
Yeah. It's like about keeping a balanced perspective, or keeping your appreciation for the things that are going well in proportion to it. You can acknowledge the unpleasant parts of life, but don't let them take up a bigger piece of the pie than they need to, I think
Mhm.
is what it is. It's about applying that kind of balanced perspective. Is don't let the scales become tipped because you're giving so much relevance to the hard parts, because then that really takes the shine off the things that are great. And I like to try and remember the things that are great.
Yeah, and because 'cause they're both always present, but our brains are a little bit wired to notice those less than great pieces, but the great pieces are there even in the really hard times. There are still great pieces, um, and having some awareness of them. So in your I think it's I think it's interesting to think about your 10-year-old self because you did actually find sort of the accessible, scalable version of what you thought you wanted. I'm curious if you can tell me, like, when you think about your passion for animals and the time and effort you've spent in learning from and with them and about them, what is something that you've learned about yourself as a result of that?
That is such a good question. I think, well, it's funny that you mention the animal part specifically, because I think for me, and for a lot of people who do the kind of things we do, we think that our connection with animals is like the easy part, or the automatic part. Um, and I think actually the thing that I've learned about myself in working with animals is that I'm actually just a profoundly empathetic person all the way around. And I think part of the reason that animals feel easy is because there isn't that duplicitousness. There isn't ulterior motives. We know animals do what works for them. And I always thought it meant that I didn't like people. And the more that I do this work, the more I realize I actually have a profound love for people. And that's why I wanted to become a trainer. I always thought initially, once I was working with dogs, that I preferred just the dog part, just being a walker.
Yeah.
But actually, I love being able to connect with people and help them reframe the way that they look at their dog and their relationship with their dog. And that really surprised me because as a younger person, especially as a teenager, I thought of myself as being a little bit misanthropic. And no, the thing I've learned through this work is that my compassion is very profound and applies just as strongly to people, um, if not more so. And that really surprised me when I realized one day, you don't hate people. You really, really love people. And that's what makes it hard sometimes because people also disappoint us more often than dogs do. But I keep trying with them.
Yeah.
And I think that's what really dogs have taught me is that my heart is even bigger than I thought it was, which sounds like such a trite thing to say about oneself. But when you have this narrative that you don't really like people or that you like dogs better than people, to realize how very untrue that is
Hmm.
feels like kind of a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a huge introvert. And so growing up, I always had sort of the feel of like, I don't know, not really being sure how to connect with people because it was so draining and I wasn't really entirely sure. And I had a very similar revelation when I started working with dogs, that I knew that I had to get better at being around people and interacting with people because I so wanted to be around the dogs. But the reality was I was fed so much by the connection with the humans that I loved it, loved it, loved it. And of course, now I'm really focusing just on the human half of it. Um, and it all seems obvious in retrospect, but it didn't feel that way at the time. I mean, there was a piece of like, "Oh, wow, people are exhausting and people are a little bit scary," for me for a lot of time for a long time. And that's no longer how I feel. Well, occasionally I feel exhausted, but not usually because there is this new frame of like, "Oh, I really actually really love people." And that whole thing of, animals are doing what works for them, and so are people. And when the people are exhausting, it's usually because they're protecting something too, like that they're just as we wouldn't get too upset with a fearful dog being a little standoffish or growly. Oh, is that why you're like that? Oh, okay. Well, what could make that the best feeling option for a person? And when you get curious about that, then all of a sudden there's all this compassion for that person who feels that way.
Yeah. And that's another thing that I've really learned so much through my work with dogs is, sometimes when my husband is having a problem or we're talking about something, I'll say, "Forgive me for putting it in dog training terms." And he says, "Why? It's just psychology." And
Mhm.
it's true, that trigger stacking applies to people, the same, like you said, all behavior serves a function. That applies to people. Um, and kind of applying that same almost impartial rubric to what I'm seeing with people. Like we're supposed to observe before we assign emotions to dogs. And the same is true for people. If I can take my emotions out of the situation, out of the analysis, I can see this is someone who's really struggling, or this is someone who is really hurting, or someone
Mhm.
who the dynamic or whatever the situation is that they're dealing with, they feel at or over their threshold. And that has been hugely helpful too. That is something that I'm really grateful to have learned because it applies to the people I work with, it applies to the people in my personal life, and it applies to me.
Yeah.
Realizing about myself that some days I am the reactive dog in the house, it gives me the ability to extend some of that compassion to myself and say, "You know what? You're trigger stacked. What do you need to do to regulate? What do you need to do to feel back in your body to get under threshold?" And being able to say, to express that externally to my husband or whomever, "Hey, I'm having a moment. I'm over threshold. I need to take a beat." It was so helpful to me because that is language I didn't really have before. And so that awareness kind of like lubricates things a little bit. It just it removes some of the friction in everyday life with people. Even if the person on the other side of the situation doesn't have any of that awareness, I can give them the grace to be like, okay, you're having a tough time. It's all right. Have a cookie, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. 100%. And you use the word grace, which I think I mentioned in a podcast recently. I am amazed by how often the word grace comes up in coaching calls and how rarely it comes up in my day-to-day life conversations. Like, nobody says, "Oh, I'm trying to give myself grace," or "I'm giving him grace," or what like, it doesn't it's not a word I hear very often, but in coaching calls all the time, I'd like to learn how to be able to give myself a little bit more grace. I'd like to have a little bit more grace in situations that are tricky. And what you just described there really is that, this ability to see what's there and to recognize it, like, "Oh, yeah, here's a problem," and, come at it from a really compassionate lens, like, "Oh, look, trigger stacking. You're affected, I'm affected, we're all affected. Okay, now what?" And that, for me, is kind of what grace means to me, like, to recognize we really are trying to do our best and to find ways to do it with a little bit more ease, and having that lens, I think, adds some ease. It creates some ease.
Yeah. And I think sometimes there are situations that we don't have the ability to solve.
Mhm.
And that's hard for me
Most of them.
because, yeah, exactly. That's hard for me. I like to solve problems, but sometimes just having that awareness and empathy is enough to be like, yeah, we're having a bad day. You're struggling because XYZ, and I can see that, and that's okay. And it'll pass. So sometimes just even for people I don't particularly like or I don't agree with, acknowledging that they are, doing their best or functioning under the constraints of their specific life can just give me the ability to move on instead of perseverating in my dislike of them or my frustration about their choices. It's like everyone is led to the present time by all the things that they have dealt with before and everything that they're dealing with now. And just being able to be like, it's okay. They're doing what they're doing. It's okay. They're doing what they feel they have to do. You know, I think especially now in such a chronically online world, we become so preoccupied with what other people are doing, both good and bad. And I know for me, like definitely comparing myself to other trainers or seeing people doing things in a way that I don't agree with. And it's easier to disengage by just saying, it's okay. They're doing their best. Or, that's what they think makes the most sense for them. It's okay. Just let it go.
If I could give you a magic wand and you could sorry, folks, coughing. Um, if I could give you a magic wand and you could give us a blessing or grant a wish, what would you give us?
Oh, okay. So this one feels superficial at first, and I will explain. Um, the thing that I would wish is that no one had to worry about money. And the reason that I wish that is because if if we didn't have to worry about money, if we weren't essentially, burdened by the weight of living under capitalism, think about how much more we would have to give to ourselves and to give to other people. And especially when it comes to working in the field that we are in, which is it's a place where burnout is so common and so prevalent. If we didn't have to worry about making ends meet or making a certain amount of money or filling our client load just to be able to satisfy our material needs, I think the work that we could be doing would be even more transformative, even more incredible. And then we could afford to be really, really discerning about where we would be most efficacious. So that's the sort of thing that I wish. I mean, honestly, I wish it for everyone. I think it would improve a lot of the problems that we see in the world and would allow us to focus on bigger and more pressing concerns, but also to focus more on joy. Um, that's what I wish. That would be my wish for everyone.
I'll take it. That sounds amazing. That sounds
Yeah.
amazing. Thanks, Morgan. So if people wanted to learn more about you and your work, how could they do that?
They can find me on Instagram at We Leash the Hounds, and they can also find me at WeLeashTheHounds.com. Or if you want to visit FamilyPaws.com, I am also there under the Find an Educator tool. And yeah, I'm a chronically online millennial, so you can find me if you want to. I love talking dogs with anyone and everyone, and especially dogs and babies. It's a niche I did not expect to love so much, but I really, really do.
Well, that's awesome. Well, thanks so much for talking dogs and people with me today. I so enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
That's our conversation for today. If something we talked about resonated, I invite you to sit with it. Notice what feels true and what you want to explore further. You don't have to have it all figured out to start moving toward what matters. Whatever showed up for you today, clarity, questions, even resistance, trust that it's pointing you towards something important. For more support, join my weekly notes at colleenpilar.com. And until next time, remember, you are enough. Always, just as you are.